So with that, I'll turn it over to Laura and mute this center over here.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Heather. And yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties this morning. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm in my office in Aberdeen, so you cannot throw tomatoes at me. After you hear this, I don't think there's gonna be a lot of surprises, but kind of confirming what you all have probably heard as far as the spring outlook goes, but we'll go into some of the details there. And this is just a reminder that we will see summer someday. This was a severe thunderstorm over the Aberdeen airport that I saw last summer that eventually developed into a tornado out in the Stratford area. But anyways, we will see summer, I hope. I'm sure we will. First of all, I like to review kind of where we've been. So looking at the past year, this is the last calendar year for 2018. Looking at departure from average temperature, how much cooler or warmer than average were we last calendar year. Anything in the green, blue, purple was cooler than average. So that's most of the areas of the state. There's a weird red spot there in eastern South Dakota. I would kind of ignore that. They must be missing some data or something. But really near average or cooler than average last year, which is also consistent with the precipitation that we saw, and I'll show that in a little bit. When we have wet conditions, we often have cooler conditions as well along with that. Looking more recently, so since the first of the year, this is the difference from the average temperature that we've seen just in the last 2 months. And I pulled this this morning. So when you see those purple areas, that's 9 to 12 to 15 degrees below average for a 60-day period. That's really quite incredible, given that January started off actually on the warm side. The first 2 to 3 weeks of January were actually warmer than average. It's really been since the last 5 to 6 weeks or so that we've really seen these extreme cold temperatures. Up north here, you know, we're seeing February temperatures, you know, pushing 20 degrees below average, which is really unusual for the winter season. Further down in the southeast, in the Sioux Falls area and the Black Hills, not as cold as compared to average, but certainly cooler than average, more in the 3 to 6 degree range for the last 2 months. And so I wanted to share this with you too. This is actually what we've seen on the long-term trend. So looking back several decades, this is the long-term trend that came out in a national climate report about 1.5 years ago. Looking at annual temperature trend, there on the top, the large map, showing most of the state has been warming about a degree to 1.5 degrees in the long-term trend. If you look down on the bottom left, most of that historically has been concentrated in the winter season, not so much in the summer. So that's another thing too, in that I think a lot of us have become kind of accustomed to more milder winters in a way over the last few decades. And that when we see these cold years like this year, like we saw in 2014, 15, and so on, they really become quite unusual, quite exceptional for us. In the summer season, we do see some warming, but some areas that are slightly cooling as well, so kind of a mixed bag. So the summer is really a little bit different story, but looking at the winter, we have been on a warming trend more than any other season. Looking at the precipitation side, again, kind of backtracking back towards the 2018 calendar year, really quite extreme wet conditions in the southeastern part of the state. No doubt about that. I think we all kind of know that from being out and about and hearing all the stories and working with farmers and ranchers in the area that have really dealt with excessive moisture pretty much all season long, starting with the growing season. They had about 30 plus inches of snow in April last year. And then it just continued kind of wet and cool all the way through harvest. And I know there's a lot of standing water still out there. down in that southern area, especially around that Yankton, Tyndall area down south. So I know there's a lot of water out there. A little different story out west, for if anyone is on the call from the Black Hills or far western part of the state, they really had quite a wet year as well. The different story there is that they were preceded by 2 years of pretty severe to extreme drought, so that they had the need for that moisture, and they really really welcomed it. And whereas that was a different story down in the southeastern and southern part of the state. So looking at since the first of the year, so again, just the last 2 months, really still quite unusual precipitation. Anything in the purple colors, 200, so twice the average moisture than average for the last 2 months since the beginning of January. Anything in the blue, about 150 to 200% of average. So, winter is our dry season. Typically, we expect less than an inch of actual moisture, be that the water equivalent of the snow or whatever that might be. So it's usually our dry season. So it's kind of easy to get above average if you get one huge or a couple big events, but we really haven't had like a single big event. We've had a big long series of small events that might characterize as nuisance events, but bringing 1 to 4 inches each time, and then some wind that follows, and really hard to stay on top of as far as snow removal goes, and moving snow out in cattle yards and those kinds of things. But yeah, certainly unusually wet as we add it all up for our season so far. Again, most of the snowfall, most of the moisture started probably mid to late January. We were kind of on the dry side until then. So again, this is really just the last 5 to 6 weeks or so. And here, comparing that kind of towards a long-term trend, again, from that same climate science report that came out about 1.5 years ago. Looking at the top map, that's the annual trend in precipitation. And looking at South Dakota, most of us in this state are getting wetter faster than almost anywhere else in the country. A few other areas in Minnesota, Iowa, kind of through the Central Plains are similar, but overall, our state is getting wetter faster than almost anywhere else in the country. And that really dark green in the central part of the state, that's pushing 15% trend for increasing precipitation. And that includes rainfall and snow, the moisture in snow. The unusual thing is that we don't see that so consistently in the winter when you go down to the seasonal maps there at the bottom. But we do see that trend very strong in the spring season and the fall season. And so that's contributing to the concern, I'd say, as we get into the spring season, where we're getting out of what would typically be our dry season and into that spring where climatologically we increase rainfall, but also on top of that, we have a long-term trend of even more increasing rainfall. And so if we see another year like that, I think that's one of the worries that we have looking ahead. This is just a picture I threw in from our house this morning. I don't think I'm the only one getting sick of looking at snow, but yeah, our kids were hoping for a snow day today, but really snow has been the story of the season, no doubt about that. Just to show you a few statistics here, this is for just February, and I picked out 3 locations, Sioux Falls, Aberdeen, and Rapid City, just to kind of capture a snapshot of the state. Sioux Falls for the month looks currently about 9th coldest on record, and for Sioux Falls, the records go back at least to 1906, so over 100 years of record. The average for February so far is just under 11 degrees. Snowfall, 5th snowiest at last check at 21 inches. Precipitation about 16th wettest. So, you know, a lot of that snow was kind of drier snow. It did carry a lot of moisture, but certainly had quite a bit of it to add to the seasonal total there. Just looking at February again for Aberdeen, looks like we might clock in at third coldest, and here our records go back to 1893. 1.5 degrees are is the average temperature, so it just tells you how cold it's been. We've had a lot of below zeros or really far below zeros for up here. Snowfall, sixth snowiest, just over 19 inches. For the season so far, we've added up over 50 inches. To put that in comparison, the bigger flood years we've seen, I think it was 96, 97, or maybe 2010. Those bigger snow years where we've had spring flooding measured more like 80 to 100 inches of snow. But still 50 inches of snow is not anything to ignore at this point. And just to give you some of the company we're hanging in there with snowfall, that 19 inches is very similar to 2001, 11, and 2007. So those are all other recent spring flooding years. Precipitation as far as moisture goes in that snow, about 16th wettest. So again, we've had some really dry snow events, but certainly above average for moisture for Aberdeen. And then Rapid City, looking out west, just to give you an idea, this has really encompassed the whole state. Right now they're running their coldest February on record, but they have a shorter record that I had access to only back to 1948. But still, that's over 60 years, 70 years of record. Average temperature, about 8.7. Snowfall, fourth snowiest, behind 2011, but ahead of 2018, so just ahead of last year this time. And precipitation was seventh wettest. So again, wetter than average, pretty much across the state for most areas. And to kind of sum that all up and one kind of drought map, obviously there's no drought on the landscape at this point, given how much snow and moisture we have out there in the snowpack. I know some areas, particularly in the central part of the state, maybe north central, did end the season last year a little bit on the dry side in the soils. But we're optimistic that with the snowpack we have, that at least get some of that water in reserve to use in the spring, and will hopefully run off and melt, filling up the stock ponds, and hopefully contributing to spring grasses, spring forage growth, and that kind of thing. So, but I'd like to remind folks too that when you do see drought, you know, at those early signs, if you see it degrading out there, please feel free to reach out to any of us in Extension and let us know what's going on, and we can and I can share that forward with the Drought Monitor authors, because we have that conversation almost every week. Not so much now this time of year when it's wet and cool, but certainly in the growing season we talk about this pretty much every week on drought areas. And here's another way to look at it. This is looking at soil moisture. And how different from average for this time of year we see soil moisture. And there I'm again looking at that central, the north central, northwestern part of the state where we know the soils were a bit dry going into the winter, and then they froze, so they don't really have a lot of capacity to take more moisture. But certainly the areas in the purple out west, along the south and southeast, wetter than average for this time of year through the soil profile. One of the other questions I've been getting now as we look ahead towards the rest of the winter is, okay, what's the deal with El Nino? You know, it's kind of been teasing us for a few months, and then just a couple weeks ago, it became kind of official, met the official criteria as far as NOAA and the Climate Prediction Center goes. And so still, regardless, it's a weak event. So historical patterns that we see with El Nino maybe might not hold as true this year. But we do sometimes see a late winter, early spring kind of pattern towards more significant impacts tied to El Nino. So there still might be something there. I wanted to show historically, though, what we've seen, at least in southeastern South Dakota, since some of you there in the Sioux Falls area. This is looking at precipitation. The blue color lines are El Nino, so if you want to look at that. This is looking at January through December, each month. If we see wetter or drier than average precipitation. You'll notice in January, February, really not much of a connection with El Nino as far as precipitation goes. But as we get into March, at least historically, more often than not, we've seen wetter Marches. And so I think that's another factor here as we look at the climate for the spring, the outlook. We're getting climatologically into a wetter season. We've got the long-term trend of wetter springs on top of that. Plus we have El Nino, which often also brings wetter March anyway. And so kind of adding all of those together, I'll show you what the Climate Prediction Center's come up with. But there's a lot of factors leading towards a wetter March at least, and maybe into early April. As we get into April, tends to hang a little smidge on the dry side. May, not too much of a connection in El Nino. And usually by May anyway, we see less reliable connection with El Nino, and it usually dissipates in that spring season. Look at the temperature side of El Nino. Looking at the red bars, those are the El Nino composites or averages, and many months, well, December is a big one, but more often than not, we usually see warmer winters, January, February, and spring, slightly warmer than average as well. And that's really not the case, obviously, this year. And so just another sign that with the weak El Nino, usually that strengthens the jet stream, brings it further north over our area. But this year with the weak El Nino, it's really kind of dipped south and allowed for that cold air to come down from Canada. So, you know, kind of a mixed bag here on what you want to read into the tea leaves here as far as El Nino signals go in our area. So looking ahead here at the official outlooks, I'll start here in the 8 to 14 day period. So 1 to 2 weeks from now. This is from the Climate Prediction Center. They do also issue a 6 to 10 day outlook, which I sometimes show. It's very similar to this, so I'm not going to spend time on that. Pretty well advertised, I think. And I'll say it here again, that we're going to be below average temperatures for the next 2 weeks. Very high confidence in that, as you see with the really dark blue there on the left image. When they're pushing 80% probability, that's very high confidence as far as the forecasters go on this cold pattern over South Dakota here on the next 2 weeks. On the right side, that's the precipitation outlook there, favoring wetter than average. So after this snow that comes through here today, looks like we'll have a period of probably a few days on the drier side, but really very cold. And then it looks like another kind of active pattern is what we call it, where every few days you get a little system come through. So that's what it looks like, maybe starting midweek next week, something like that. Around midweek next week. Again, getting into that cold, snowy pattern again in that 1 to 2 week period from now. This is a snapshot of some information that came out yesterday jointly with NOAA, which is the Weather Service agency, and also the USDA, the climate hubs in the Midwest and Northern Plains. really focusing on this extreme cold that we're expecting next week. We've known for a while, maybe close to a week, that we'd be pushing record cold temperatures in early March. And it looks like that is probably the case. And we don't often see sub-zero temperatures here in March. That's really unusual. And so this will really affect all of us here in the Northern Plains, as you saw on the map I just showed. Here's another way of looking at this. This is from the Climate Prediction Center, looking at they have these hazard maps they put together for temperature. They do it on the hot side in the summer too, but this is the cold side. You can see the dates there with the really navy blue solid line encircling South Dakota. High confidence in extreme cold temperatures on March 8th, 10th through 11th. So really about a week from now, next weekend too. So keeping that in mind, I think this is going to bring up some real issues for any of you guys who work with livestock operations in particular, and that this is going to be an ongoing risk. Keeping attention on the rations, water, and calving. That's a really, this is a really tough time to have these cold temperatures with that weather pattern that's kind of steady snowfall pattern kind of on top of that. I forgot to put in a slide here, but there is a cold advisory for newborn livestock, CANL. That's a forecast tool from the National Weather Service. The Aberdeen office runs it for their area. And you can look up, weather.gov CANL for cold advisory for newborn livestock. And they'll give you the forecast for risk of mortality in the first 24 hours for newborn livestock. So I encourage you guys to check that out if you're looking at forecast risk. But for those of you more on the banking or econ side, risk management side, this is one thing I wanted to highlight too, is that making sure you or your growers, your producers, are documenting their losses if they need to file for livestock indemnity program. This was an issue in Montana not too long ago where I believe it was during the drought time and some other things were going on, and they didn't document their losses as well as they maybe should have, given everything else that was going on, and so they weren't able to qualify or take advantage of that program. So just a reminder to do that, and also taking care of the humans. That's the last bullet there. Taking care of the people. I've heard a few people, at least a few people, having heart attacks and getting sick out there, moving snow, taking care of animals, and so on. So another thing to watch out for your clients and friends and family during the extreme weather. So looking ahead beyond the next 2 weeks, this is the outlook for March that just was updated yesterday afternoon. And certainly the first couple weeks of the month, first few weeks of the month are going to dominate March, right, as far as temperatures go. No big surprise there, very high confidence and colder than average for March. Looking at the right side, though, there's a little less certainty as far as precipitations go. We're kind of squeezed between an area to the north that's favored to be drier. That's that B, below average. To our south, maybe along the southern part of the state, flirting with wetter than average conditions in March. So again, a lot of this outlook often leans towards the first couple weeks of the month. So I know there's a little less certainty as we get, out about 4 weeks or so, 3 to 4 weeks from now. But that's what we're looking at for now. But more moisture in the south is not really what we need, as I've kind of alluded to. Looking here further ahead, March through May, and this is from a week ago. They didn't update this yet yesterday. This is from a week ago. And for the 3 months there altogether in the spring, leaning equal chances of warmer or cooler than average. That's on the left. Again, we're starting off March so exceptionally cold, and a little less certainty as we move ahead into the spring season. Looking on the right side, that's the precipitation side. Maybe the southeast might be teased with some wetter conditions, but it's not really high confidence. Most of the states equal chances of wetter, drier, or near average at this point for March through May. Again, we have the climatologically increasing rainfall, we have the long-term trend, and then El Nino, which is kind of less certain this year. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty as we get later into the spring. But as we turn from spring to summer, that's where we see a bit of the change, at least in the moisture pattern that's on the right, favoring wetter conditions across the south and southeast. This has been pretty consistent in the last couple iterations of this outlook for the late spring, early summer. The month of May is where we see this relatively strong. I wouldn't say super strong, relatively strong in the long-term outlook. And then as we get into June. So the other thing to know with that on the left side, on the temperature side, is often when they favor wetter conditions, they do not favor warmer. It's very difficult most years for us to have warm and wet at the same time in the growing season. So if we lean on the wetter side, often we have a cooler year, kind of like we did last year, where it was really wet and it was cooler. More often it's cool and wet or hot and dry, kind of paired up. And again, with all the moisture we have out there, if our soil continues to be moist, carry that moisture forward, again, that favors cooler temperatures as well, or maybe near average. So still a little bit of time between now and then, but that's kind of what we've been looking at pretty consistently the last couple of months. So to kind of look here at that spring season, right now, this is how much snow is on the ground. This was, I think I grabbed that just this morning. Yeah, just this morning. So you can see from the gray down in the far southwest, it's almost no snow, to the far northeast, you see some of those darker purples. That's probably 12 to 16 to 20 inches as you get across up in that northeastern, east central part of the state. So, and I'm sure many of you have been out there. I've seen a lot of buried fences, kind of checking how many wires are buried under the snow or drifted under. There's a lot of snow out there. And I know up here about 20 inches is pretty consistent, 15 to 20 inches of snow depth right now, as of yesterday anyway. The next question is how much water is in the snow. And so what I'm getting to here is what we can expect for flooding. And this is how much moisture is in the snowpack. So that really light, pale turquoise color that covers most of the state, that's about 2 to 4 inches of moisture. And as you get into that blue, that more periwinkle color, you're looking at more in the 4 to 6 inch range for moisture in the snow. And then you see around the Clark area, so west of Watertown, south of Webster, and some other isolated areas, you might see, pushing 6 to 8 inches of moisture. So that's quite a lot of water. If you imagine all that as rainfall, that's a lot of water. And that's what's held in the snowpack right now. And we just keep adding to it. One of the things about this winter is that with it being so cold, at the same time while we've seen so much snow, it's not melting in little bits and pieces as we would ideally like to see. The really cold temperatures are just holding the snowpack in place, not really allowing much melt. And so we just keep adding on, just keep accumulating. And one of the biggest concerns here is the longer we hold on these cold temperatures into March, the higher the risk of flooding when we do see warm temperatures, when we get into that spring season. Because then it's more likely, potentially, that we'll warm up in a hurry and all that moisture will melt almost at the same time. And so that's one of the worries. Also, as we hold on to the snowpack longer into March, into the spring, also increases a chance of rain on snow event, which is almost a worst case scenario. When you warm up quickly and have rain on top of a snowpack, that can melt snow very quickly. And so that's another risk that we're looking at as we go into the spring season. So last week on Thursday, Friday, NOAA, the National Weather Service, in cooperation with the Army Corps of Engineers, they do the outlook for the Missouri River itself, the main stem. But looking at all the tributaries in the area, this is their flood outlook for the spring. So anything in purple has a greater than 50% chance of major flooding. Okay, you'll see that it's basically the big Sioux River from Brookings southward down to the Missouri. Also, there's points in the Red River up north, some points in Minnesota and northwestern Iowa, favored for major flooding. And if you think of it too, that's a lot of places that were saturated from last spring, at least on the southeastern South Dakota side. Up north, if any of you have interests up there, a lot of that flood outlook is mostly snow driven. They weren't exceptionally wet going into the winter, but due to the heavy snowpack, that's really what's driving it up north. Here in the red, you'll see a lot of red squares there around the Jim River Valley and Upper Big Sioux. Anything in red, greater than 50% chance of moderate flooding at those forecast points, at those points along the river. Again, here along that 281 corridor, in the James River and the Upper Big Sioux, they did have a wetter fall, but it had been dry before that during much of the season. So we didn't go into the winter thinking we'd had a really huge flood risk, but now really it's looking at the snowpack. And as I showed you earlier, most of that moisture is focused on the northeastern part of the state. So they've now indicated moderate flood risk, at least up in that area. Here's a close-up of the eastern part of South Dakota. For those of you out west, there are no rivers right now anyway at risk of 50% chance or greater of moderate or worse. There's a couple rivers that are potentially at minor flood risk, but nothing moderate or major out west at this point. So here's that zoom in there of eastern South Dakota. Looking at the red and purples, those are the ones that are most concerned about at this point. And what does that mean? I have about 4 forecast points. I got 2 on the moderate flood side. This is the James River at Columbia, just north of Aberdeen. Moderate flood level at that location is 16 feet. We're already at 16 feet. You see a lot of flooding at agricultural land. And then they have actual local bench or landmarks that may get flooded as well. So, you can this is all on the NOAA River Forecast Center page. If you ever want to check it out, it's kind of in the details there, but these are kind of the benchmarks they look at for what might get flooded. Big Sioux at Castlewood, they're south of Watertown, where moderate flooding at that site is 11 feet elevation. And so there again, already at 11 feet, you can kind of see there in the middle, significant amounts of pasture and other ag lands will be flooded. I think it goes without saying that we're not going to see early activity in the cropping side this year. I heard someone say yesterday that they're just bailing on their spring wheat planting and just looking right ahead. to what they might do instead of spring wheat, because it's getting too late for them to wait for the snow to melt. Obviously, prevent plant, I think, will be an issue, and the flood damage and repairs could be an issue too for some of your growers around the region. Looking at the Big Sioux River at Brookings. Now, this is the part of the Big Sioux that's forecast to hit major flood levels. That's 12 feet or higher. If any of you are in that area, and remember last fall, I think last fall it got to moderate flood level. So major flood is 12 feet elevation. There you see already quite a bit of flooding on the lower lands, some outbuildings. And when you get up to 12 feet, you see some benchmarks there as far as particular streets and locations that begin to flood. When you get above 13 feet, you're looking at a bridge south of Derry that's overtopped. So you can see some real significant impacts when you get into this major flood stage in that area. And then looking south of Sioux Falls, the Big Sioux at Akron, that is a 20-foot flood stage right there as it gets into the Missouri. And there you get Highway 48 flooded at that level. So again, you'll see all these lower impacts in the minor to moderate level all impact agriculture lands, a lot of them. So no big surprise, but just a reminder that a lot of our folks will be having to deal with water this spring. I wanted to share some updates with our weather station network we call the South Dakota Mesonet. That's the website there, mesonet.scstate.edu. We installed 3 more locations last year, 2 up north at McIntosh and McLaughlin, 1 down south at Rosebud. So those are all 3, they are all on tribal land, but they were kind of holes to fill as well on the map. So they're great opportunities to add some new stations to the network. On the right is one of the stations, what it looks like, with some updated equipment. So last year in the spring, we added on 2 more thermometers to every Mesonet. So one at the top, right under the anemometer, if you see that up there. And then one down at the bottom, kind of in the tripod area of the stand, another thermometer down there. So the lower one is 1 meter. The top one is 3 meters, about 10 feet. And the idea here is to directly measure temperature inversions for pesticide application. So for those of you who work with pesticide applicators or farmers who do their own work, we have this on every Mesonet location now. We're directly measuring temperature inversions, which is the only network in the state doing this right now. In addition to everything else, we've got rainfall, soil moisture, soil temperature, pressure, humidity, and wind, and all that other stuff too. So we haven't taken anything away. This is what a snapshot of the website looks like if you're to look at current conditions. This isn't obviously today, but give you an idea that you get an update every 5 minutes on every station across the network, with current conditions, a summary of the day so far, a summary of yesterday, and then the weather forecast and so on. And there's some other tools there as well. The one I really want to emphasize that we've brought online this last year is what we call the spray tool. I know it's not super creative there as far as the name goes, but it's really targeting pesticide applicators and the weather information they need for record keeping, but also to determine whether they want to go out or not. This is an example from Brookings from last year that I grabbed one time where we actually had an inversion, again, using those 2 thermometers, those 2 extra thermometers. On the top right here in this slide, you could see that red color, inversion detected. It's kind of a stoplight system, so it's like red, yellow, green. Red, obviously, there's inversion detected. Yellow, it's near 0 temperature difference. And then the green means not inverted, not inversion present. And then we actually give you the actual degrees on how different the temperature is between the top and bottom. We also have wind speed, wind gust, wind direction. You see that in the bottom left, or on the left side there. That's, again, a red, yellow, green kind of thing. Where yellow, it was just on the borderline of what might be ideal conditions anyway. So we got red, yellow, and green there, just as a caution. It's not, you know, you don't have to, they don't have to tie that, but we use it as advisory tool when sprayers are going out. And then sunrise, sunset, which is important for some chemicals, and then the forecast as well. So we try to have a lot of the key pieces here. We're going to be adding a couple other things to this, like estimated wind speed at the height of the boom, which is required for some of the chemicals as well. So we'll keep adding to this as people need stuff or would like to see some add-ons here for the spray tool.
Laura, we had a question. If you could go back and show the map of all your locations of the Mesonet.
Okay.
The question was, why are there so many on the East Coast?
Initially, they were by opportunity, and starting in Brookings. First of all, they're at all the research farms, all the research stations, so that favors a lot of the East. And then again, I think my predecessor just had more contacts of people out East. We really love to have a station in every county. We have a few that have gone offline out in the western part of the state due to loss of sponsorship. So we'd love to get those back online up in the north too. So they're really actually just driven by sponsors, and if we can have people help support those stations, that's how they go. So yeah. Okay. All right, so here's I'm going to show just kind of two maps from the Mesonet here of some newer things we have. This is obviously not current frost depth, but we do have this kind of map updated every day. I believe down in the southeast, we're pushing 2 to 3 feet frost depth. Up north, more like 4 feet or more in some areas. So you could kind of get an estimate of frost depth as well. And we use this a lot, not just for agriculture, but look at utility lines, water lines, those kinds of stuff, those kinds of things as well. We use this for a lot of different things. And a new thing that we have out there, we're just kind of testing it out for now, was looking at soil moisture. So we have 5 sensors all the way down to 40 inches. They're not evenly spaced, but this kind of looks like that. But we call this the poker chip map. And so each stack of poker chips is a station, and then each chip is one of those sensors. This is an older map because it's a little more interesting to look at. But the gray ones at the top, those are ones that are already frozen at that time. So, you know, we can't get soil moisture if it's frozen. But then you can look deeper down, and like the green ones are more wet, the yellow and orange are more dry. So you can kind of get an idea of how much moisture is out there in the soil when you look at this on a broader picture. So with that, kind of the summary again, we have El Nino, but it's a weak event. The thing I'm worried about there is maybe increased precipitation in March, especially in the south. Snowfall totals are less certain. I've heard a lot of rumors about how much snow we're going to get in March. I don't think we're going to get 50 or 70 inches. That's really not realistic. But we are going to have a steady stream of weather in the 1 to 2 week period from now. Really cold, extreme cold, I think, is really more concern over the next 1 to 2 weeks as well. And then really flooding is the other big story as we get later in the spring. I was visiting with some guys at DENR the other day, and I have a call again later today. Most often they see the highest flooding, you know, March 20th to about April 10th. So that's a possibility again this year, and we're going to be hopefully staging resources and getting ready at the state level to deal with that. And again, I encourage you to check out the Mesonet. If you're even just curious about the weather, just want to check it out. And then we also have this Cocoa Raws group, which is a volunteer weather watcher group. I didn't share any pictures on that. But we're using that data a lot with the daily rainfall, snowfall, snow water equivalent data that all those observers are sharing. We're getting a much better handle on our likelihood of spring flooding and drought when we have drought. So I encourage anyone who's interested in watching the weather to do that. I have some rain gauges too, most of the time, for observers who are interested. So with that, you guys probably have already seen the new extension website. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter if you want to follow me on social media at all. And during the growing season, we try to put regular updates, at least through the agronomy team, through a pest and crop newsletter. I know the beef team puts out a lot of articles as well. They do a great job. So with that, I'll share my information here, Heather, and I'm happy to take any questions, or people can reach out to me later too.
Okay, I think I'm going to be able to allow everybody to unmute if they have a question, maybe somewhere. Okay, so if you have a question, I believe you can unmute your microphones and ask your questions, and we'll take a couple minutes for them if there's anything extra that you have to ask.
I saw Jack ask a question about my tiki torches, and so that wasn't a problem because we got big snow early, and then I couldn't get down to the ground to unscrew them out of the base, so they just got stuck for the whole winter.
Well, it's kind of appearing that maybe they're going to let you off early.
Okay, I stopped sharing my screen, so you're good. Thank you guys for your attention today, guys and gals, and I hope you have a good growing season this year, despite the challenges we're going to see early in the season.
Okay, with that, I've been sending emails and trying to see how Lisa's doing getting here from Brookings, and haven't heard from her yet. So hopefully she's not in a ditch someplace. But with that, I do have Jack Davis is here in the house, and so we might put him on a little backup. So we're going to switch some things up at the computer. I want to show you the new SDSU extension webpage before we kind of get rolling, just so that you can see that. We have something new to share with you, so we're going to do that here quick. So run, grab a cup of coffee, refill that, and we'll be back talking to you in about 30 seconds. Okay, so what I put up on the screen there is the new SDSU extension webpage. You can see that the tagline is extension.sdstate.edu. We had you all pretty well trained on how to go to igro.org. We're updating and changing and becoming just full-blown extension now. If you type in igro.org, you're still going to get routed to our new pages here. So this is the new look and what she has going on right now. So all of the extension articles are posted here that you've been, that you've known to appreciate and love. So you can see that we still have the different tabs. They just look a little different. Click on corn and you go down into different newsletters and the most recent results back and forth that way. So one of the things that we've heard from producers is that they're not finding what necessarily they're looking for. So if you come down here under like the fungicide trials, if you go into these little italics boxes that are text at the bottom, those are links to more information as we go forward. So more information on crop management is underneath those little tabs. So we can get crop treatments or just go to the sorting page from here. So a new look, we just got to kind of learn a little bit again on how to find what we're looking for. And I think it's going to be very effective and very efficient for us once everything gets up there. So if you're not finding what you're looking for, let us know and we'll try to make that happen and put everybody in touch with the new method of getting around our new extension page. So Lisa just skidded in, I'm sure in more ways than one. We'll give her a second to do some finger exercises to let go of that steering wheel, and we will get started here in a couple seconds for you. Here we go. Okay, so Lisa's with us, and with that, we will turn it over to her.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Today I'll be talking about pre-planting marketing opportunities. So to get started, to give you an overview of what I'll be speaking about today, first I'll start with an outlook and talk about fundamentals and a few technicals. Then I'll discuss rule-based marketing plans. And then we'll move into pre-harvest marketing strategies, focusing on risk and reducing benefits. Then if we have time, I may go over new generation grain marketing contracts and then takeaways. So to begin, I'll start with soybeans. And first, you can see this is showing the marketing year 2017-2018, and we can see the different colors denote the usage, and we can see that green is crushed, seeding residual yellow, exports are blue for the previous marketing year, and ending stocks are white here, which is 438. And if we look at this year's forecast, we can see the decrease in expected exports, and we can see how our ending stocks number jumps up to 910 million bushels. So we have a lot more carryover bushels that's expected going into the next marketing year. And if we look at that in relationship to price, we can see the previous year, the average marketing price was $9.33. So with this large carryover, we see that that's suppressing prices here, and the expected farm level price is $8.60 per bushel. And a lot of this is due to the China-U.S. trade dispute. And you can see this is a historical graph of ending stocks going back to 2004. And we can see we are very high stocks from, relatively speaking, 2005 and 2006. Then we got into this period of low ending stocks from 2007 to 2015. And then you can see the past few years here, we've been building up on our ending stocks. And we can see that relationship to price. So when we saw lower ending stocks, we saw that there was more support for higher prices during that time frame. Now to kind of back up over this past year, starting in April of 2018, I'll kind of go through a chart here on timeline of the U.S. and China trade disputes. And the top line is March soybean prices, while the bottom line is for prices for March corn. And we can see this point here, no new tariffs, China. It was expected to increase purchases significantly. And then we keep moving along the time frame. About mid-June, U.S. announces 25% on China's tariffs to begin July 6th. And China would place tariffs on U.S. ag goods. We can see that prices kept going down at that time frame. Mid-July, well, U.S.-China implement 25% tariffs. And we can see the U.S.-China implements more tariffs beginning of September. And then November, question whether Trump and Xi, a deal would be reached. Trump, and you can see it here, just had a long and very good conversation with President Xi of China. We talked about many subjects, and after that tweet went out, there was a 30-cent move. So the market is really watching what happens here. It's been basically dominating the market ever since these the U.S.-China negotiations here have been going on, and it's something that will continue to have cause volatility in the market. And you can see how any type of insight on the direction and how long this will last will have strong impacts on the market. And then in December, let's see, Trump and Xi agreed to a truce, and that's kind of been the past, going back since April, where we're at right now, and we're continuing to wait to see what happens, and if we can hopefully reach a deal in the near future. And basically, the market's expectations is that they're expecting the deal will be reached. So we'll talk about a little bit about the analysis that we've done, looking at predicted soybean and corn futures price without the tariffs. Now, this was back looking at November 1st, 2018. So the prediction in the model was showing soybeans around 9 to 9.70, And at that time frame, November 1st was at 8.30, while corn was at that time frame at $3.63. But with the model, without the tariffs, we were expecting around $3.90 and $4.10 back November 1st. Remember, that was a big point in the timeline here, that November 1st talk where we were, expecting something to happen. So the market expectations changed about where they thought things were going. So the predicted tariff impact, November 1st, for soybeans around $9 to $1.70, corn 20 cents to 40 cents per bushel. And if we're looking at since November 1st, as of February 21st, we gained about 81 cents for soybeans, while we gained about 16 cents. So the market is expecting that a deal will be reached. And, depending upon if it is or when it is, if it is reached, we might see a bump, but I wouldn't expect a huge bump because you can see a lot of that has been priced back in. Now, if we look at the U.S. soybean production versus U.S. soybean production in Brazil, actually, it's estimated for the first time that Brazil produced more soybeans than the United States in 2017 to 2018. And weather has been an issue down in South America, and so from December to February, Brazil's soybean production did decrease by 5 million metric tons. So that's something to continue to watch, is the size of the Brazilian crop. The exports. So U.S. accumulated soybean exports. This was for 2017, and this is a typical curve that we typically see the pace of exports. And that was 2017, and we reached about 56 million metric tons is what we exported, is the estimate. And if we go through this year, you can see right now, the last time I updated this was around 23 million metric tons. Okay. Then the question comes down to, we talked about what according to the last WASDE, what our expectations were for exports, which then that funnels into our ending stocks level. And the USDA estimate is that yellow line. So we've got to really pick up pace and to reach that estimate. If we don't, okay, then what's the scenario? Well, maybe we use more domestically, maybe we that ending stocks number even increases more. So we're running a risk of seeing even higher potential ending stocks, depending upon what all happens with the relationships between U.S. and China. Looking at March 2019 soybean futures prices here, USDA average farm price is $8.60. We do an adjustment for futures, so we add 40 cents. So that puts us at around a $9 average futures price. If you want to look at maybe what's the 67th percentile for futures prices, that could put you at 930. So you can see top 1/3. We've not reached that, only around, let's see, in December we broke that. So, depending upon how you do marketing plans, if you look at price targets, you could be looking at, according to the USDA price, the 67th percentile, around that 930 mark there. Okay. Okay, so, and that's looking at, if you're a soybean producer. Now, if you're buying soybeans, then you just take the, you're looking at the 33 percentile for futures price, so that would be 870 there. And we haven't really broke that until a little bit before November there. So looking at November 2019 soybean futures prices, let's see, we have estimate USDA at 875, then we put our futures adjustment, so around 915, so 67 percentile. You want to call it maybe the top 1/3. The target would be 950. So we've been hovering around that, and we've been over the past few weeks above that point, and so that's, you want to consider some selling opportunities, depending of course on your risk for your operation, but as we approach that top 1/3 of 950. Okay, this is looking at the buying side, so we haven't seen that since really November. The 60, really the 33 percentile would be 880 there. So if we're moving to corn, we can see that since 2016, we've been drawing down on our ending stock numbers here, and you can see the forecast where we are versus 2017, 2018 marketing year. And you can see that with the lower ending stocks forecast for 2018, a slightly higher supported price.
So Lisa, a
yeah,
question
sure.
came in that says we've lost almost all 16 cents this week.
Yes.
Any idea what's going on there?
Yeah, I've been putting this presentation together last week, and I think I would have had a different, perspective on some of the selling opportunities there in corn. And really, I'm for sure I haven't been following the day-to-day, commentary. So I'm not sure why that has been what the news is right now, but I don't know if Jack, if you've heard anything, any of the chatter.
What I would pick up, which most everybody has picked up a little bit, is probably that we didn't come with a deal as we met with China.
Yeah, right.
Because we had priced probably a lot of that in, like you showed.
Yeah.
And we keep talking about that it's getting done, but it's not being proven.
Right, right.
So,
and so I guess together,
yeah.
done in Florida soon.
Yeah.
So
I
agree.
I would kind of feel, I guess,
It's kind of a pullback from that
Yeah.
expectation that a deal will be reached,
Yeah.
a little less certain on that. So they've taken some of that bump out.
Yeah, so just
I agree.
sitting to the
I think
side
you're probably
till-
right. Yeah, I don't know if you heard, but what Jack was saying was just, some of this on the trade between US and China, and wondering, maybe the market participants are a little less certain that a deal will be reached here in the near future, because here it is March 1st, right? So
I think the other thing, maybe Lisa, that's come in is some of the weather risk has been taken out of Brazil and South
Right.
America.
right,
As
some
they're
of the
getting,
weather risk out.
getting into their harvest more.
Sure.
And
A little bit more comfortable of
Yeah.
what production numbers are
Yeah.
down in South America too. So, yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. Thanks, Jack, for adding in there. Okay, so March 2019. So looking here, new crop targets, USA average farm price 360. So we make that futures adjustment 390, 67 percentile 402. So looking for selling opportunities as we approach the top 1/3, closing in close to $4. And so we really haven't seen, that would have been back in mid-October, we were around 390. So then just on the buying side, so you can see here where we're at, more signals for buying 33 percentile, for new crop corn would be $3.78. So more signals there. December corn, using the USDA number 390 adjustment for futures, and then would be 420, and then we'd be around that 431. So we haven't been close to that top 1/3, nor the from a fundamental perspective the 420 either. And then, okay, so moving to basis. This is taken from this region here, East Central. You can see the past movements on basis by year, and you can see 2019 here, where we're at. So the trade conflict has been really playing on both aspects of futures and cash as expected. So we haven't, well, we're better than what we were, but down here while this was taken into account, this is 2018 here, so beginning in the August period, we rebound a little bit, but we've seen really weak bases, and you can see seasonality there. You know, it's hard to predict bases, probably as you're all well aware. We have seen, you know, if you look at a few of these years, maybe a bump start to happen, you know, in the March timeframe, but a lot of uncertainty, as you're well aware, with everything and the conditions, and coupling that with the trade situation. So corn, you can see corn 2019 here, where we're at. So actually, you know, a little bit, you know, better than historically, a little bit stronger, and you can see that movement and how it does vary over years by time here. So one thing we talk about developing marketing strategies that are rule-based, and some can be fundamentals, they can be dates, they can be price targets, it can be a combination. You can use technicals, and if you're interested in technicals, you can look at bar chart, and you can do some custom settings, and you don't have to pay any subscription to use some of their tools on overlaying technicals on futures prices. So if we're looking at March soybean futures here, okay, so I did, yeah, okay, so this here, and it hasn't been updated, you know, I think I did it maybe last week or something like that, but it gives you a guideline nearby, kind of some targets here, looking at the upper band, and potentially if we break the upper band, or approaching the upper band, potential selling opportunities, but we've backed off, you know, that level since I've updated these charts here, and we're more in the middle range here for March. But you can couple some of these technicals with option strategies. So like at this point here, and the settings for these were optimized using the tools that we have in the e-trading facility. For soybeans, we use a 144-day moving average and a standard deviation of 2.5, and that's what we use to develop these charts. And you can do the same thing if you put the settings into bar chart. You can create the same ones, and they'll be up to date for you. But by being able to couple potentially technical strategies with options, if you break, you can look at a strategy where if you break or you're closing in on the upper bound, you could sell a call or buy a put when the price crosses above the Bollinger Band. Likewise, if you're approaching the bottom Bollinger Band, or if you break that point, you could look at buying a call or selling a put when price crosses the lower Bollinger Band. Okay, here's what I was looking at. So I don't even know what it is today, but we've been lately around that average, around that moving average there. So we're kind of in between those. If we're looking at November 2019, like I said, I was working on this last week, and we were really, you know, getting close to that upper band there, and we backed off that the past few days here, and more getting closer to the average again. Corn, we've lost quite a bit there over the past few days. We're now back close to the lower band there as well. I don't know what it is currently. This was from yesterday. And then corn December again, we're down close to the lower band. So like our viewer pointed out, you know, we've lost quite a bit in these markets over the past few days here from where we were. So I wish I could have been here a little earlier, because there have been some little bit better opportunities than right now if you're looking on the crop producer side. That's why it's good to have these this time of year to kind of connect and look at some of this. So rule-based marketing plans, this is something that we talk about, is creating an actionable with decision points that is aligned. You know, there's not a one-size-fits-all marketing plan. It depends upon your own operation, your production costs, your risk tolerance, your cash flow needs, and thinking about that coupling with your insurance. So you want to look at creating these rules. If this happens, then do this and sell this amount of bushels, and you can use triggers as dates or fundamentals, technicals, or both. If those don't trigger and you need to make sales, then you can have secondary rules, and sometimes just using dates, or then even changing your technicals if you're using technicals within a more narrow range can help make some of those decision points too and provide more confidence. So pre-harvest marketing strategies, I think when you think about what strategies you should be utilizing on your operation is thinking about how much revenue risk am I carrying. So first, how much are you carrying? Okay, so you have price risk, you have yield risk, and you have geopolitical risk. So there's a lot of risk out there. And it's looking at, okay, trying to think where you are right now in revenue risk, and thinking about considerations between price and yield relationship, thinking about how much percentage of expected crop that you're covering. And when you're using options, we talk about this a lot, is understanding what delta is and watching that, because that can change over time, and thinking about your strike levels for different options. So I provided some that I'm going to go over some applied revenue risk, and we'll first go over corn. We'll talk about price yield relationship. We'll talk about revenue risk, expected prices, hedging the futures, just for an example. And then for soybeans, I'll show the applied revenue risk for protective put strategy, a covered call strategy, and a collar strategy. So this is utilizing this analysis. We've built models where we're able to generate these type of graphs, and I'll talk about additional educational opportunities that we'll have showing how you can personally utilize these tools. In the beginning of April, we'll have a workshop and a webinar. But this is for 2019 corn, specifically utilizing USDA NASS county level data for Minnehaha County. And we're using real-time prices where we're stimulating corn price and yield risk. So predicted trend is at 202 bushels per acre, predicted December futures around $4. So it's typically the case that price and yield, they move in opposite directions. So this actually creates a natural hedge. However, this is not always true depending upon where you are in the United States, especially as you move away from some of the production, the predominant production belts of corn and soybeans. You can see some different types of scenarios between these relationships, and even if you go into western South Dakota. But this is important to know because this impacts your revenue risk. This is very important. This correlation does impact your revenue risk. So you could potentially be maybe you're overhedged, or you could actually be underhedged depending upon that situation. So this is just this is revenue, corn revenue per acre and futures price, 2019 corn, Minnehaha County here. And what we can see, and then I added in insurance. And what that does is that moves up, you basically lose these lower points here when you add in insurance, okay? So if you have insurance, then you're reducing some of these lower revenue points. So insurance puts a floor in your revenue, okay? And Then this is based on the program model. So for 2019 corn, cash price expected around $3.49, top 1/3 would be $3.79. Expected, let's see, expected current futures around 4, top 1/3 $4.50. So a little bit higher than some of the fundamentals here. And so if we move into, again, 2019 corn, Minnehaha County, we have our revenue per acre, we have our futures price. This is with insurance, okay? And the expected revenue would be $663 per acre. A standard deviation of revenue, $147 per acre. So that's your risk there. That's your risk, the standard deviation there. And if you want to look at a risk-adjusted return, which we use, you can, that would be the Sharpe ratio of 4.51. That's just with insurance. Now, let's say with insurance, and then let's say we're hedging, and these are all just examples to show you how the shape of the revenue distribution changes, what you're doing when you're doing these strategies. So let's say you're hedging, you were able to hedge at 406, maybe you're covering 10% of that expected yield, you go back. So it's a slight change there, okay? So expected revenue, about the same. You've reduced your risk here. You've reduced the standard deviation in revenue by reduced it around $20 an acre. Your Sharpe ratio, so you want your risk return reward there, you want that higher, so that actually went up. Now if we look at, okay, as an example, you're covering more bushels, just to show the illustration of what's happening. So let's say you're covering 50% of expected yield, so your expected revenue went up by $15 an acre from the base. Standard deviation, it went down from just insurance, so now it's only at $75 per acre. Your Sharpe ratio, which is a good thing, it shot up to almost 9. So this is just showing the examples of the range of decisions when you're going along the production cycle, because your revenue risk is changing throughout the production cycle. It's right now, you don't even have a crop in the ground, so you have all this yield risk. You go through, you start to get through the production season, you can be more sure on what your expected yields might be and be able to narrow down that yield variation in your expectations. But sitting out here right now, there's a lot of yield and price risk. This is just the extreme here, so then covering 100%, then you can see it's at that point. But it's just to illustrate the diagrams on how your revenue risk distribution is changing. This is with no yield variation, okay? Then you can see how that then narrows around the line here. So then moving to soybeans here, this is again for Minnehaha, and then we have insurance. So we've cut off, we're putting in that floor. This here is with insurance, and expected revenue $484 per acre, standard deviation in revenue $126 per acre, a Sharpe ratio of 3.83. Now, this is illustrating the importance of that relationship, your personal farm relationship with yield and prices. So we saw the previous, now we're saying, in the previous one, it was saying there's no relationship here. Now we're actually modeling what the historical relationship has been for Minnehaha County. And the relationship is -0.44. So the expected revenue is actually $506. So that's up. So that natural hedge is helping you. So your expected revenue is up by $22 an acre. Standard deviation in revenue, it's down $18, so it's now at 108, because you have that natural hedge between prices and yields working for you. And your Sharpe ratio is up too. So that's a positive thing when you have that natural hedge occurring, but that's not always the case. So it's important to be able to figure that out. Now, so now we're looking at the strategy. This is what the revenue risk looks. So we have it with insurance. We have the yield variation. Let's say we're buying a $920 put, and we're covering 10% of our expected yield, okay? So expected revenue, $507 per acre. Our standard deviation is now at 105, so we've changed that. We're down. We've reduced that just slightly, down $3 an acre. Sharp ratios went up slightly. Then, if we're covering 50% of our expected yield, buying a $920 put, so then what this illustration shows you is then expected revenue about the same. You've again decreased your standard deviation revenue, so it's down $13 an acre, and slightly increased sharp ratio with the put. And then with insurance, and this is just illustrating the point of how your revenue changes with you know, the amount of coverage that you're then covering, how many bushels. So 920 put covering 100% of expected yield. You can see those changes in expected revenue. Standard deviation is going down. Our sharp ratio went up. Okay, so then we take out the yield, no yield risk. Okay, so basically looks like the textbook, right? You remember the textbook picture of showing a put. Basically, it's just like the textbook, except this point here is kinked upward because you have insurance, okay? So that is what the put is doing for you with your revenue risk, okay? Now, we don't have, I'm going to skip this, but you know, you can read about that later. So we're going to go ahead and move to, now we're going to utilize a different strategy. So we're back here, we have our revenue, soybean revenue per acre, our risk here with insurance and yield. Let's say we're selling a 10-20 call. Now, I did this last week, so I'm sure it's not as maybe rosy as it is now, but selling a $10-20 call, let's say you're covering 10% of expected yield, okay? Expected revenue, about the same, but you're reducing your standard deviation by about $7 an acre, and your sharp ratio went up, which is a good thing. Then let's say you're doing the same thing, you're selling a $10-20 call, but you're covering 50% of your expected yield, just to show you graphically, you know, as you move further along and you're covering more bushels, what your revenue risk is looking like. So your standard deviation then, when you're covering more, you're decreasing. It's went down. Now it's to $85 per acre, and your sharp ratio has went up. And then the extreme, okay, 100%, that's what it looks like. You can see those changes in expected revenue and your standard deviation, and your sharp ratio has went up. Okay, so then, oh my goodness, we took out the yield risk, and what do we have here? We've got basically the textbook picture, okay? We've got the covered call. That's what your revenue risk, that's what you're doing when you are choosing the level of what you're utilizing, okay? And then you can look at this later. I don't have time to go over the details here. Now we're doing a different strategy, okay? So now what we'll do is we will buy, we're doing a collar, typically called a collar. So buying a $920 put and selling a $10-20 call and covering 10% of expected yield, okay? So with that scenario, we are reducing our standard deviation from our baseline of just insurance. We're improving our sharp ratio, which is a good thing. We want a higher sharp ratio. And then we're going out covering 50% of expected yield, okay? Then we can see our standard deviation That has went down, so we're now around $80 an acre. Sharp ratio has really shot up on this strategy here, 7.32. Let's say, just to show the extreme here, covering 100%. And then we take out the yield variation. No yield variation, okay? So you're at the end, you know what you're gonna be, or you're already combining. Oh my goodness. So we created that textbook picture there. The only difference is, right, is our kinked up because of insurance. Okay? That's the collar. If you want more information, I didn't have time to go over the details of the strategies. This is a great resource here, www.theoptionsguide.com. And I would suggest going there and look at some of those details. Okay, I want to share, over time we've been seeing new generation grain marketing contracts emerge. And we have a lot of different names for them across firms, and they've changed over time even. You typically see an averaging contract, different names. It's really complicated because different firms have different names. You can see some of those names here. You have your typical minimum price contracts. You have price contracts. There's just a lot of different options, but it can get confusing when you're looking from elevator to elevator because of the differences in the namings. But this is something that I'll show you a little bit about the historical performance here. Keys to elevator contracts is fully understanding the terms, understanding deliveries, requirements, especially when you're looking at accumulators, and carefully considering where to set the accumulator and trigger prices. There's a good chance you can go above the accumulator strike, so you need to be aware of the double up on the accumulator. So there's a lot to know on the details, and from firm to firm they can differ, slightly, but there's basically some generalities in these grain elevator contracts here. It's a lot to see here. This is soybean marketing strategies, historical risk and reward here. What we have on is the y-axis. This is the returns. This is per bushel. Risk is down at the bottom, just measured as standard deviation of portfolio. What we're showing here is examples of the accumulator, which is this orange, kind of have this yellow greenish color is average price. You have the collar, which is this bright green protective put, and blue, the pink, is price plus. So you might ask yourself, oh, how have these done over time? Well, the better performing ones are, you want to see them higher and further to the left here. And I have summary statistics of this, but you can see it here graphically too on the different years here. But you can see, for example, if you're looking here at 2008, you can see how further the higher up, so some of these here are better in 2008 versus, for example, the color, one of them is the accumulator and the average price, and then you want them higher too. And so you can see over here in 2008, some of the better performing would be the collar. This one here is a collar, then the blue is the protective put, and then the
Plus.
yeah is the price plus. So something to consider, risk versus return. So historical performance. So what you want to see is the higher prices are denoted in green. So this is just looking back 2008 to 2016 for soybeans. You can see more green in a price plus. So overall, higher prices received for a price plus strategy. Now, if we're looking about this risk-adjusted return, the sharp ratio, best return, darker green areas. Again, price plus. It's not always the same, you see that, but it also had a higher sharp ratio as well. So you might be asking, okay, what is this price plus? Well, if we're looking at the new generation marketing contracts, you can see Cargill, it's called the bonus offer, CHS, Cash Plus. Producer options, something that you can do yourself that's similar would be to sell a call and selling a futures contract to those. Now, looking at the same strategies in the same years, but for the corn market, again, you want to see the better performing is to the higher and to the left. So you can see, I know it's hard to read here, but again, what we're seeing, like for example, here in 2008, you can see that the green being the collar, the blue, the protective put, and then the pink, the price plus, at least in this year, would be better because they're higher and further to the left. Now, if we're looking at kind of basically this information summarized, then you can see it's kind of a toss-up here. You see higher prices for both the collar and the price plus. And sharp ratio, again, actually price plus is a little bit better. So just looking at some of the things that we've talked about, trying to summarize some of, I know this is a lot of information here. Top 1/3 of future selling price targets, if you're looking for an old crop based on, for corn, for the fundamentals and technicals, we're kind of around that $4 range. Soybeans, somewhere around the $9.30. New crop price targets, corn, somewhere here from $4 to $4.50. Soybeans from $9.50 to $10 here. Okay, so the takeaways, basically, if you look at all this information with the price targets, you know, we're seeing better opportunities. I don't know what it is today right now, what's going on, but for specifically looking for new crop soybeans. New crop soybeans, you know, if we're coupling this information on these price targets, you know, we're seeing better opportunities right there for new crop soybeans. Like I said, last week, things, you know, if you're looking at that 1/3, and that's important, you know, if based on your own operation, you know, maybe you shouldn't be looking at that 1/3. Maybe you should, you know, cut that back a little bit depending upon your risk tolerance. But it's just something to think about in general terms. And I know a lot of different marketing agencies, they promote that 1/3. So just showing you what that would be at. So tariff situation, you know, volatility is going to persist. And thinking about pre-harvest marketing strategies, the first thing you need to think about is your revenue risk. What does it look like right now? What do you want it to look like? How do you want it to look? What can your operation tolerate? I know we went through a lot and we were showing those different graphics, but you really need to think about the different strategies that you're doing and how that's transforming your revenue risk and what you want your risk to look like. And thinking about rule-based marketing plans, it's something that's actionable. I've seen a lot of information out there and, you know, how to develop a marketing plan, but if it's not actionable, you know, you really don't have too much. It needs to be actionable where there's decision points along the period. And you need to have both harvest and post-harvest marketing plan that does have some flexibility. If, you know, the current situation changes, then, you know, you need to have a plan for how you can adapt that as well. We talked about using technicals, simple Bollinger Band. I know I didn't go over it in detail, but it's just a moving day average. So you have a moving day average, and then you couple that, you develop an upper band, a lower band based on a standard deviation. You can set that by different moving averages. What you see typically, the default on a lot of programs is a 20-day moving average, and maybe a 2 standard deviations, something along those lines. But it's good if, you know, you have the opportunity, or if you can look at how they perform historically, different types of settings, because they dramatically change historically what prices that you would receive over time. So it's nice. It's a wonderful resource that we have the e-trading facility where we can do some of that work and have access to the data. So remember, you're coupling technicals to option strategies. So one of those, if the price breaks above an upper band or is even approaching, you could consider selling a call or buying a put. Price goes down below a lower band, lower Bollinger Band, you could buy a call or sell a put. Pre-harvest marketing strategies to consider. There are many. These were a few that we went over today, actually applying that to applied risk, so you're able to see graphically what it looks like. We went over hedging futures, protective put, selling a call, doing a collar, selling a call and buying a put. And we also talked a little bit about, we weren't able to dive into the details, but we talked about new generation grain contracts and historically at the top performance. And in conclusion, over the years that we looked at for soybeans, Price Plus showed the best prices received and risk-adjusted return, which is similar to selling a call and selling the futures. Corn, we saw the best performing was both the collar and Price Plus. And just going forward, I know we'll have another WASDE report and just monitoring market conditions and how the trade situation continues onward, and also, especially for soybeans, watching those export numbers, really seeing what the pace is going forward, because I think we have a substantial risk of not meeting that and thus potentially increasing even our carryover. So there are additional resources. We were fortunate to receive a grant. I know this was a lot of information, so maybe if you want to, Jack's laughing, he sees himself up there, but Jack's got some great videos online. So if you go to igrow.org and navigate to the YouTube channel, Managing the Margin, there's some videos on rule-based marketing plans. There's videos on new generation grain contracts where we go over more details. And also there are some articles too that you can look at. And we're working on finalizing our web tool. So you saw those images that we created with revenue risk and where you can put in different strategies to look at that. It's been a long process, and Jack's been in the workshop. He helped assist that last year, and we were using Excel, and some of you might have been at some of those, and it was hard, compatibility issues, but we're moving over to a web-based app, so you should be able to utilize those. We hope, we'll have that, hopefully, we'll definitely have it for the workshop, and then we'll have a formal rollout on iGrow. So we will have educational opportunities on how to use those web tools. So we will be releasing the workshop. We're going to have that on Friday, April 5th. It will be in Brookings. It will be from 12:30 to 5 o'clock p.m. And we do have one guest speaker confirmed. We will have Scott Gert. He is from the Food and Agricultural Policy Research Institute. He will be with us via Skype, but he will be there. And he's associated at the University of Missouri, and they always put out their baseline projections and do lots of testimony on Capitol Hill for USDA expected, commodity prices. And so he will be with us speaking about outlook. And we have another individual too, and just haven't confirmed that one yet. But like I said, in these workshops, we'll go over different strategies. We'll go over how to use our risk web apps, how you can utilize them anytime and even on your phone. And if you're not able to join us for the workshop, we will also have a webinar where it will be really a condensed version. So you can see from 12 to 1:30, we'll show kind of the basics of how to use the tools and cover a little bit of outlook and some of the other materials, but we won't have near the time that we will have in the workshop. So those are additional opportunities, and the webinar will be Thursday, April 11th from 12 to 1:30. And I would just say, if you're interested in those, watch iGrow for registration to come out, or if you have questions, just email me. So I appreciate your time today, and thank you. And And if there's questions and if we have time, I'd be happy to answer those. If we don't, then feel free to call me or email me too. I'd be happy to answer further questions later. Thank you.
Okay, so I've given everybody permission at this point. If you wanted to ask your questions instead of typing them in, you should be able to unmute down in the left-hand corner if you hit that little microphone button. Unmute and ask your questions. We've got a couple minutes here before we bring in our next speaker. So any questions out there? Well, apparently Lisa has either really answered everything you had or gave you so much to think about that we don't know what to ask at this point. So Lisa has watchigrow.org up there for registration. We don't use that webpage no more.
Oh,
We've got
sorry.
our new one.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, Heather.
So go to the extension.sdstate.edu webpage, and that's where registration information will be. But we will mute everything here in Sioux Falls for a couple seconds, get our next presenter ready to go, and be back in probably about 2 to 3 minutes. So
Thank you.
Just one.
Oh,
okay, so here we go. We're going to start with our final presentation today. If you've listened to very many of the other webcasts that we've done, I've talked a lot about creating a team as you're working on your businesses, and your team could be your lender and your crop insurance agent. Lisa just shared a lot of marketing stuff with us. And so at that point, maybe we need a team member to help keep us moving forward with our marketing plans and those types of things. So we brought John in to give us a little bit of an idea of what that team member can look like and how they can work with you and for you and help you with some of those types of things. So I will turn it over to him, and we'll go from there to wrap up.
All right, very good. I'm on?
You're on.
Perfect.
It's
Great.
you.
All right, thank you. First off, quick introduction. So name is John Milius, grew up on a farm. My parents, my brother and his family all farm up in northeast South Dakota. Farming's in the blood. Went to school at State and graduated, it's been 13 years ago, been with Hurley ever since. So I'm going to be talking about something I'm extremely passionate about. It's what I do every day. When you talk about that team element, that is so very true. And what I think a good way to put it is, it's kind of like a mechanic. If I have an issue with my vehicle, I'm going to take it to a mechanic, and I'm going to drive in there, and they're going to have probably 1,000 tools at their disposal. So you walked through a number of different tools. There are a lot of things that you can use. The big thing is, which one do I use and when? So when I drive to that mechanic, he's going to do some diagnostics, and then come back to me and say, you know what, here's the issue. It's your carburetor. And he goes and he reaches for about 5 tools, because he knows those 5 tools need to be applied to my situation. It's the same thing in marketing. We could lay out 1,000 tools at your disposal between the elevators, the brokerages, you name it, on down the line. But the key is understanding which ones should I use, when, and why, for what reason. Okay, so where that starts then is really, well, I got to put this up here, by law, got to get that disclaimer out there. Okay, so jump to the good stuff. First off, I'm going to just say this is what I am not going to cover today. We're not going to talk about supply and demand tables. I'm not going to talk about technical analysis, so on and so forth. There's a plethora of that out there. I'm not going to talk about tariffs, Trump or tweets. If you do have a question at the end on this, I'll gladly answer it. But the key is nobody knows where the market's going to go. So we're not going to talk today about price direction at all. Here I have marketing, my name, my title. Oh, I don't have my Hurley shirt on. I have marketing in my title, and yet we're not going to talk about price direction. Because why? Well, we have found the largest marketing failures are commonly driven by a flawed approach or philosophy, and really a lack of basic marketing strategy. Lack of understanding around basic marketing strategy. All right, I probably just added confusion. What does this mean? Well, at its core, you first have to define, in the producer sense, you produce corn, soybeans, cattle, hogs, you name it. So what is the definition of marketing? It's not promotion and advertising. It's purely the act of securing revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you start viewing it through this lens, it changes the way you approach marketing. It starts changing your mindset. You notice that marketing is not knowing where prices are going to go. It's always fun for me to go and sit down with a new producer and say, we aren't going to talk markets at all, because any of my opinions about the market really don't matter. Opinions can be wrong, the market is always right. So let's flip that around. Let's talk about how we can secure revenue for your business, your farm operation, the best way possible. Okay, so we've done a lot of subjective research. So basically just asking lenders, we deal with lenders quite often and just naturally in what we do and the clients we serve. So we've asked a lot of lenders, agronomy input suppliers, and producers directly, how do you markets? There's really one of 2 ways to approach it. There's the market-minded marketer, and there is the business-minded marketer. And really I put up here 80-20, that's to soften the blow. It's more 90-10. So 9 out of 10 producers out there market through the market-minded lens. That's how they approach marketing. So what does that look like? Well, an easy litmus test is if you ask yourself the question, when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to spend 10 minutes a day on marketing. What do you do? What do you think a market-minded marketer does?
Looks at the prices.
Look at the prices and read commentary, and read more commentary, and read more commentary. Whether you pay for it or you get it free, you read a bunch of commentary, you find everything you can to support your human bias, and then you go with that. That's the market-minded marketer. And generally what happens is you kind of fall into a rut of being reactive. You feel like, boy, I should have done this, I should have done that. And, you know, tomorrow we could get a resolution to this whole trade war and all of a sudden the markets will all be fine and dandy again, right? You know, that's a market-minded marketer at work. Our goal, my goal in this next 30 minutes is to get as many of you as possible to migrate from the market mindset to the business mindset, because it flat out works. So what does the business mindset look like? Well, first, I better break down the market-minded approach quick. This kind of puts it in a little bit clearer terms. There's a few steps that the market-minded producer uses, and that is, unintentionally, step one is they disregard their business. Your farm, your ranch, your feedlot is a business. You are in the goal of making a profit, year in and year out. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's the truth. If you don't make a profit, you ultimately could cease to exist. You or your next generation. Pretty harsh, but it's the truth. It's business. Okay, so the market-minded producer generally disregards their business up front, unintentionally, and they put that focus around the markets. So read commentary, coffee shop talk. George down the road says corn has to go up because the snowpack is too much and they're not going to plant any acres of corn. That's what it looks like, all right? But the thing is, your business needs to generate revenue. Okay, so ultimately you have to sell something. And really where it puts the control is in the hands of the marketplace. So your business is placing the control in the hands of an unpredictable force, the markets. And here's the key, down at the bottom of that slide, decisions are based on what? Emotion and opinion. Now think of it from an input side. If your agronomist comes out and says, you know what, I feel like it'd be great to throw some canola on that ground out there. It feels good. Feels like a good idea. And you're like, canola? Hey, we don't even have a market for it locally. I have no idea how to raise canola. And your agronomist goes, well, yeah, but it just feels good. I think it'd be a good idea. It's my opinion. I think it'd be great. Or if your agronomist comes out and says, hey, here's your soil types, and based on data that we have received over the years, this seed will work the best, this plant population will work the best, so on and so forth, based on logic and facts. Which agronomists are you going to work with? Well, of course, the one that's logical. Marketing is no different. It's just the other side of the business equation. You have the input side and you have the output side. All right, so if you base your decisions on opinions and emotion, we talked earlier, opinions can be wrong. The market is always right. No matter how much people cuss the USDA, no matter how much you think there's 4 foot of snowpack everywhere, corn has to go up because everything's going to flood out or it's going to be a late spring, so on and so forth. The market is still right. A person's opinion can be wrong. All right, questions to this point? All right. Flip it over to the business-minded approach. The other 1 or 2 people out of 10, how they approach the markets. And you'll generally notice these producers because they kind of seem like they have it together. They have a sense of control, confidence in the future, just a calmness about them. Probably have the business-minded approach. Step 1 in marketing is eliminate the markets. Get rid of them. Quit thinking about them, shut off the DTN. It might take a week, it might take a month, but eliminate the markets and get your arms around your business. Okay, some of the crucial things, I'll jump to that in the next slide, but cost of production. You hear this preached every time you talk to a lender, anytime you talk to almost anybody in the industry. What is the cost of production? And yet it's uncanny how about less than a third of producers truly go through that exercise. That's one of those basic foundational pieces of a market plan, is understanding cost of production. Also understanding when you need that money. So I might need $200,000 by November 15th, and I might need another $250,000 by March 20th to pay the bills. That market plan should incorporate that at least a year in advance, at least. For example, I'm currently, like with a producer to here, it had been early week. We talked about kind of a plan of attack into the 2020 crop year. He knows he's got the crop rented. He knows his cost of production this year. We're kind of overlaying some of that into next year. But he also knows that his rental, the way he has all his rental agreements put together, he needs to move a fair amount of grain before April 1st. Okay, so we're planning 2 years out, April 1st. We're already thinking about, okay, we need to make sure as we lock in revenue, that we make sure some deliveries line up so that he has cash in hand. He can write the checks April 1st of 2021. Like it's being proactive in nature. It's that mechanic approach to it. We know what tools to use. We know when to use them. Okay, so the business-minded approach. So step 1, eliminate the markets. Step 2, get your arms wrapped around your business. Step 3, lay the markets onto your business. Say, what do they mean to me? What does $3.32 corn mean to my operation? Because I'll guarantee it means something different to me than it does to everybody else in this room. Work with a number of father-son operations, and it's just amazing how completely different their market plans are. Even though the grain gets commingled in the bin, they're running equipment across the same ground, they're financially separate entities, and they have completely different market plans because the markets mean completely different things to those two operations. It puts this control back in the hands of your business, and at its core, it all comes down to how you make choices in life. Any of you that are parents, you understand this. You talk to your children all the time about making good choices, making good decisions. Was it good to hit little Johnny? No, because it hurt them. That was a poor choice. Was it good to give little Johnny a high five? Yeah, it made him feel good. That's a great choice. It all comes back to the decisions we make. All right, I'm going to lighten it back up quick. I forgot to mention a little more about myself. I've been married to my wonderful wife for 11 years and have 4 children. So we just had our 4th. We gotta be careful what I say when this is being recorded.
It's recorded,
so,
yeah. Careful.
So I have 4 kids. I'll leave it at that. I like the Jim Gaffigan analogy on that. He said, having your 4th kid, it's like you're drowning and somebody throws you a baby. So it's a lot of work, but a lot of fun. Okay, so we're getting this proper mindset put together. How do we wrap our arms around our business? Well, there's kind of 4 big elements of it. There's the financial side we already talked about. How much do you need? When do you need it? What's your working capital situation? What's your debt structure? All of that. Logistical, storage, basis locations. I could go on and on. Environmental, production variability. This is a big one. For those of you that are maybe located in Campbell, South Dakota, and watching this versus those located in Garrettson, South Dakota. Big difference in production variability there. Completely different market plans. So if I were to walk in the room and say, hey, everybody out there, you should sell 20% of your corn today because I think it's going down, that's bogus, because it doesn't take into account anything about that operation. All right, personal, this is a big one and often gets left in the dust. Goals. For most of the producers we serve, we incorporate return on investment goals or some specific goal. Maybe a producer has a goal of adding 30,000 of storage next year. Okay, let's start incorporating some of that cost structure into our goals. Return on investment goals. Maybe it's paying for little Johnny's college education or half of it next year, half of their tuition. So we're gonna add that into our goals. When you tie all those things in there, it just creates much more clear decision-making to sell grain, secure revenue, or protect grain or livestock grain and secure revenue. What is the stage in business? So talk about the father-son situation. Dad is 60-some years old. Do you think he wants to go out there and tear down the world and grow? No. He wants to come and hold our new 4-week-old child. I mean, it's a different stage in life. Son, 40 years old, children, maybe has some that want to come back to the operation, has a whole different outlook because of that stage in business. He's wanting to grow, he's wanting to improve his operation. That all ties into the plan of attack. And then down at its core, this is about where it gets the most dry, but the most important. Elements of a solid market plan, documented. I put a qualifying question here. If you're a producer watching online or in this room, can you hand your lender a copy of a market plan right now? And if the answer is no, then that's a good place to start. What gets written down gets done. So just naturally in what we do, kind of that team element. So we are the kind of the marketing arm with the operations we work with. We naturally deal with lenders quite often. So we get the documented market plans in the hand of the lender. And we'll poll the lenders and ask them, do many producers have market plans? Not many. Okay, the ones that do, you have a copy of it in their file. And they look at you like, I've never seen a written market plan. So what we're finding is that market plans are simply like unicorns. Everybody talks about them, but they've never seen one. So it's you, the producer, your opportunity to change that, because the lender will be much more on board and in your camp if you have a documented plan of attack. And don't think it has to be so extreme and elegant and include, 86 of the tools in that mechanic's shop. Maybe it's just one. And you do that one tool well, and you lay that in front of the lender. they're gonna get on board much, much easier in financing you in the coming years. The other thing on the documented piece, to try to make it stick better, create a visual for you, think of sitting at the coffee table with your spouse, and you say to her or him, I'm gonna, next time corn hits 345 cash, I'm gonna sell 10,000 bushel. Now, imagine the same scenario, you're sitting with your spouse, and you say, honey, the next time corn hits 345 cash, I'm gonna sell 10,000 bushel. And you write it on the napkin, and you slide it over to them, and it's theirs. Which one has a higher likelihood of getting done when corn hits 345? Of course, it's a rhetorical question, the one that gets written down. Well, why? Because honey is gonna hold that thing back up and say, hey, did you sell corn? It hit 345. And if your answer is no, it's gonna go to 360, she's gonna say, well, you were of clear mind and solid judgment when you handed me this napkin. So I think it would be a good idea to sell 345 corn. What gets written down gets done. I better keep moving here. Transparent. Two people equally informed will seldom disagree. This is that whole idea of lay that plan in front of the lender. Don't sugarcoat things. Don't hide things. Dynamic. Things change. If you're a producer in, pick a spot, in Brookings, I mean, there is snowpack like you wouldn't believe, and say you're gonna plant 600 acres of corn, 600 acres of beans. Well, there's a potential that you may have to shift some of those acres from corn to beans based on how things are setting up today. So maybe that within your plan and all the dynamics of it, maybe you lean towards hedging a little bit more of the bean side and a little less of the corn side, just in case. So you don't overdo the corn and then have to figure out ways to buy out of contracts or something like that. Executable. This separates the wheat from the chaff. You have a plan, you put all this thought and effort into it, and if you don't execute it, it was a waste of time and energy and brain power. So, all right, I'm gonna jump past those. I do want to tie into this one very quickly. It won't be quick because it's pretty awesome. It's a great return on investment tool for your farm operation, and that is storage. But there's a key difference between the market-minded marketer and the business-minded marketer when it comes to storage. Market-minded, they view it as a safety deposit box. It's a place to put a short-term asset, corn, soybeans, wheat. It's a place to put it and hold it and hope that the price of that asset is higher when you take it back out of that safety deposit box. So it'd be like me going to the bank and putting a gold brick in a safety deposit box, and then 10 months later I come back and I pull that brick back out and it's either worth more or less, right? There's other reasons for storage, but that's kind of the key difference. Now, the business-minded views storage as a strong carry and basis return on investment tool. I'm going to walk through an example soon, but gives you return to storage. This is how elevators make their money. They don't speculate in the markets. They make their money by getting return to storage. Couple influencers, futures and basis, you guys have probably covered, or you've been to seminars where you've talked about this extensively. Futures, essentially affected by global dynamics, big picture things. You know, it could be a Trump tweet, it could be a, you name it, you guys get the drill. Basis, though, is influenced by a variety of regional situations. So how much supply is out there locally, how much demand is there locally, what's the freight difference, I even put available local supply, not just supply. And the reason is, you may see mountains of grain all over the place, but if the farmer does not relinquish it, the end user has to pay for it. So they have to push basis to try to pull it out of their hands. I wanted to walk through an example of carry, and I don't know if I can, okay, you can see my cursor on the screen. Hopefully you online can as well. I wanted to use kind of a contrasting example just to give an idea of what carry is. Carry is always such a, it's a term that a lot of people just struggle to get your mind around. So hopefully this visual will help connect the dots. So what this is if you look on May 25th, 2018, so this was near where the market was peaking out before the issues happened last year. Okay, so May 25th, this was the pricing structure of soybeans. So 1053 was the futures price of November 18 beans. And then look out here to July of 19 beans was trading at 1039. So what is the carry? It's actually an invert of 14 cents. Okay, so there's the worldwide global market is telling you, we will pay you more in November than we will next July. Basically, the world is saying, I want your beans earlier. I will pay you less money to hold it for me. Now, you fast forward to July 25th of last year, so this is exactly 2 months apart in time. And then look at the futures pricing structure at that time. November is at 876. July is at 913. So what is the carry there between November and July? 876 to 913, that's 37 cents. Now, here's how an elevator approaches this. Let's say you, the producer, call the elevator on May 25th and you say, I want to sell 1,000 bushel of beans, 5,000 bushel of beans, you name it. The elevator is going to purchase that grain for you, create a contract. They immediately will go hedge it, sell it in futures. That's their job. Hedge it, don't take futures risk. So they're going to sell this 1053, and then at a later date, because they're going to take your beans in at harvest, they're going to put them in their bin, and then they're going to wait for basis and carry. So they're going to hedge it at 1053, and then let's say 2 months later they roll that hedge out in July and pick up 37 cents. What is their net hedge price? 1053 plus 37, 1090. So now the elevator, or you the producer, if you approach it this way, this is the business-minded way to approach it. You're going to put these beans in the bin at your farm, and you hedge off that risk. Sell at 1053, you roll for 37, you got 1090 futures hedged. All you care about now is basis. Now, disclaimer, of course, I picked a day where the market peaked out to create a strong illustration of how carry structure moves so much in the course of a year.
Because this is just futures. This doesn't take in any local basis.
Correct.
This is not the cash price you're getting.
Correct. Once the base is assumed, this is purely the future side. So the goal here was to show how carry moves throughout the course of the year. So on May 25th, you could have sold 1053 November. You could have sold 1039 July and just hedged the July. But by managing the carry structure, you hedge the nearby because you don't want to hedge it for less out there. And then you roll it out to the deferreds and you end up with 1090. So you hedged it on the exact same day, May 25th. But in one case you have 1039, the other case you have 1090. That's how elevators make their money. That's how you, the producer, can also add return on investment by utilizing your storage. So I also brought in corn carry. I picked the exact same 2 dates. And the whole point I'm getting at here is this is new crop December futures. This is about when the market peaked out last year. So 425, July is at 442. That's a 17-cent carry. But fast forward 2 months, the market dropped off pretty hard. And look at the carry. December to July is how much? 23 cents. We went from 17 to 23. That's 6 cents a bushel. That's probably $10+ an acre for most producers out there. A lot of producers in eastern South Dakota, far eastern South Dakota. Of course, less for those that are west. You get the drill. But if you have 200 bushel an acre, you're listening in Minnesota, 200 bushel an acre, that's $12 an acre, purely by understanding carry in the market. All right, in the interest of time, I don't want to dig into this too much, but this just basically gives you an idea of basis structure. This is a basis map across the region. This is on corn. It's gives you an idea of where strong markets are and what drives the market, where the end user demand is. Soybean basis, you can see just in the coloration, the more you go north and west, the less end user demand you have, the more it's reliant on the Pacific Northwest to purchase our beans. North Dakota exports every bean they raise. South Dakota has a little bit of end user demand up in Volga and out in Miller at the processing facilities. We're going to add the one up in Aberdeen, thank goodness. Try to build more value added agriculture here in the state is real nice. Okay, so let's see. I am gonna just leave this out here for a second. Oops. And walk you through an actual example of how to secure return to storage. For those of you in this room, you have this example in front of you. For those of you online, take a screenshot of this, I don't care. Take a picture of it with your phone. But this just shows there's really a 3-step process versus a simple 1-step making a cash sale. There are 3 steps involved. Step 1 is hedging the futures on new crop. So we circled with red circles here. On July 3rd, for this producer, it made sense to sell, I'm just going to use 1 bushel of corn. To sell that bushel of corn, July 3rd, 2017, for the 2017 crop. These at 405, so we locked that in. Now, the opportunity on that day was to sell cash to that elevator, cash at 343, 405 futures, less than 62 basis, 343 cash, harvest delivery. But instead, we just hedged the futures. All right, fast forward, step 2, roll from December to July on November 3rd is this example. So the carry structure at that time was at 30 cents. That's been historically very wide. Don't count on 30 cents. But in this example, this is real life. This actually occurred on this bushel of corn. So now you have 30-cent carry added to your 405 December futures, leaves you with a net of 435 July futures hedge price. So what is the only thing we care about now? There's one thing remaining. Basis. So at this particular elevator on May 30th, the basis for that elevator for June delivery was 45 under down here. So we lock that basis in. So you total it all up. You have 405 December futures, roll for 30 cents, 45 under basis, leaves you with a 390 cash price. Now keep in mind, On that exact date, you set the first hedge way up here on July 3rd, 2017. You could have sold cash for harvest delivery at 343. That was your opportunity. Bins, and you know you're going to put this crop in the bin. In this example, instead of getting 343 cash by walking through these steps, you ended up with 390. And what's the difference there? 47 cents. Had nothing to do with thinking markets are going to go up or down. It's purely managing basis and carry and adding return to storage. So this slide kind of pieces that all together to say, here was your opportunity initially. If you'd have just been a cash grain marketer, you'd have sold the cash at 343 or got a deferred at 357. That's only 14 cents. That's not worth it. But by managing it, the final number was 47 in this example. Well, this particular producer that we were pulling this from had 182 bushel farm average yield that year. That's 85 bucks an acre. Now, there is a cost to store, absolutely. So these are the gross dollars. You have to pay for your bins, you have to pay for your electrical, you have to pay for the augers and overhead, and you get the drill. So you got to peel those expenses back out of there. The interest on the money to store it, that's a big one. All right. So the other piece that I'll quickly kind of wrap up or pull it together. Heather asked me to talk about some of the various tools. It sounds like you've had a good coverage of a lot of the tools available to you. So you have a laundry list of these tools. Where can you go to utilize them? Where can you go to apply them? There are a number of different places, but you can kind of boil it down to about 3. There's your local co-op, your local elevator. They have various pricing tools. You just walked through a number of those this morning. I won't dive into those any much deeper. There might be costs associated with them, there might not. So like hedge to arrives at some elevators, which is purely just locking in futures, might be no charge for it. It might be up to 10 cents a bushel. A lot of times you'll see it around 5 cents. So start doing the math. 5 cents a bushel on corn, that's, $8, $9, $10 an acre. Is that the approach you want to take? Maybe it makes sense for your operation. But your basis has to make up that 5 cents for sure. Because you locked in your futures, you're waiting on basis. That's the thing you're keeping open. So you want to make sure your basis has the opportunity to make up at least 5 cents to cover that hedge to arrive. Other approach, people that you can access that have the tools, so a brokerage house, so that would incorporate the futures and the options. So puts, calls, futures, all of that. You can find brokerages kind of all over the place. Search them. If that's part of the route you want to take, search, ag futures broker, and they'll surface all over the place. The big thing that I want to stress there is find someone you trust. That is a key in any business, anywhere, anytime. Find someone you trust. If somebody's trying to oversell you on transactions, beware. Because a lot of brokerage houses do hang their shingle based on transactions. And they need to, and that's okay. But if somebody is breaking down your trust because they want to incorporate too extreme and fancy of a strategy that really doesn't tie back to your business, beware. Keep at arm's length. And then the third, I kind of walked through, I gave you an example of our approach. I believe in it, of course. I live it. So we're kind of all-encompassing, holistic. We help get our arms around the business. We help build a plan of attack for that farm. that entity, that farm is different from the one down the road. They have completely different plans. So there's 19 of us in Brookings, 70 some company wide, but the crew we have in Brookings works with a lot of producers across South Dakota and into Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, and North Dakota. But we get really in depth with the producers we serve. And then we kind of become that mechanic of here are the tools, here's where you should apply and why. Our service costs $5.50 an acre. Once a year, we get a check in hand for it. And the only way we know we do what we say we're gonna do is do our clients come back. And our retention, we've kept over 95% in Brookings for a number of years, barring 1 year. We dropped down to 93% of the clients we work with stayed with us. That is the only metric we use. We don't take that lightly. I gotta be careful, I shouldn't be standing here advertising, but long story short, it's very holistic, is our approach. Let's see. Heather, anything else you want me to cover? I don't want to get...
We did have one question come in.
Perfect.
So the question says, related to the storage examples, how will this work if you're storing an elevator?
Are these bushels, hopefully this person can answer this, are these bushels on storage at the elevator, meaning they're not in condo, but they're sitting at the elevator just waiting to be priced? I'll follow that through. The answer is yes. You cannot get return to storage. In fact, it is working the exact opposite against you. And what I mean by that, if you put that corn, soybean, whatever in that elevator and put it on delay price, you are now paying that elevator 3, 4, 5 cents a bushel per month. So you're dropping a penny a bushel a week for them to hold it for you and wait to price it. You also cannot contract it for a deferred pricing point. You have to price it off the nearby cash price, which is the exact opposite of trying to get carry in the market. So now you're not going to be able to achieve the carry, and you're also ticking away 5 cents a month. So it's hitting you on both ends. So you cannot get return to storage unless you hold that physical commodity in your possession. Or maybe condo storage on an elevator. You can get it through that. You can manage it through that. But open storage, free storage, that's another thing. That's a nice little trap. I get why storage is smart on their part. They want to secure the bushels, get them in hand, have a captive supply. Good for them. And unless you have a bin burning up or you absolutely need to move something, and don't do it. Just think of it. If you give them a ton of captive supply that's not priced, do they need to push their price? Do they need to push their basis? No, absolutely not. So free storage is the farmer's worst enemy, although it feels like the best thing since sliced bread. It's kind of the worst enemy because you relinquish supply and you're at the mercy of that basis and that price now. One thing to throw out there, kind of tying to the return to storage and delay price and all that, if you are sitting out there and you have grain sitting in storage and you're paying storage fees right now, it may be worth, if you don't like the current price, it might be worth doing a basis only contract. Now, why? Because basis has narrowed significantly since harvest. So your basis is very strong, but you're chipping away a penny to a penny and a quarter every week. So if you do a basis only contract, most elevators, it's stop storage at that point in time. So you no longer have to pay that 5 cents a month on storage costs.
Corn and soybean?
Corn and soybeans, wheat, yep, everything. So you can, most elevators will do that. And then you can also get probably 70% of the value of that corn or soybean. So if you have beans sitting there and it's worth $8 today, the elevator will probably advance you a check for $5.50 a bushel. So now you're stopping interest on your money too, and you're no longer paying the 5 cents a month storage fee. You notice how those pennies just add up and they add up and pretty soon it becomes a lot of money? That's just kudos to you for the education to learn these things. These things kind of just shift you over to that business mindset around marketing. Good question. Any others online?
So a comment came in with a question that says basis change from yesterday on corn increased 6 cents. Is that because of this free storage they have a lot?
No, it's because they switched the month they're bidding off of. So,
Contract change.
yep, first notice day, March goes off. Well, it's still on the board, but it's in the delivery process. So elevators, ethanol plants, everybody switches to the May futures, bidding for buy cash versus May futures. The March to May carry was around, I want to say 9 cents. So actually basis narrowed. So the basis bid widened 6 cents, right? Based on what you're hearing there.
Yep.
But the carry was 9 cents. So they actually narrowed in their basis 3 cents. That's a good little trick to know too. If you're kind of thinking, I want to move some grain in March, and you're coming up on the end of February, it may be worth, on the basis front, it may be worth waiting those extra 2, 3, 4 days. Because generally speaking, you see a slight narrowing of basis when they switch to the following bid month.
Okay. Next question says, on return to storage, what do you actually do on an elevator to take advantage of carry?
Hedge to arrive. So if you, my perfect honest answer is hedge in your own futures account. I'll just say it that way. If you understand how it works, all they're doing when you sell them grain, they're hedging it. They're selling futures. They're doing the exact same thing. So instead of them doing it, you can do it in your own futures account, and then you have full flexibility to go into any elevator. You can roll when you want. You don't have the hedge to arrive fees. You do have the commission fees for brokerage work. Okay, but if you're purely going to work with an elevator, a hedge to arrive. So today, like let's look out to new crop. Let's say you like new crop prices today. Do a hedge to arrive off December futures for corn, and then wait on carry. Most likely, call it August through September, October, November is when the carry structure will get to a point where you'll call the elevator and you'll say, please roll my hedge to arrive contract number XYZ out to July. And they'll roll it for you out to July and pick up whatever difference there. So then your contract becomes a July futures contract, hedge to arrive, and then you got to wait on basis. And then come April, May timeframe, you'll look to set your basis for June delivery of that summer, of next summer. It's a good question.
Okay, I'm going to give everybody the ability to unmute themselves if they want a question asked out loud, or go ahead and type some more questions in.
Forgot to, I don't even know if I said who I was.
You did say
You
you were.
All right,
Yep.
perfect.
You did. You can say it again if you want, but
Yeah.
you did.
So my name is John Milius, and I just threw the contact information up there. All it has is the website and our office number. I mean, you can call and talk to any of our team. I'll be white knuckling it back to Brookings, so I may not be available for the rest of the day or a bulk of it. But you can also just go online and find my contact info through there and email me if you have questions. Yeah. And I'll answer anything livestock side, grain side. I love that none of the questions have been price direction based so far. That's awesome. Means
Okay,
everybody's
Randy.
listening.
I think I have your microphone unmuted. Try now.
Yeah, you do. I just want to say thank him for his great presentation. I had looked at it on a piece of paper, but visual was way better listening to someone.
Thank you.
Thanks for your feedback, Randy. Appreciate it. I'm muting you again. So Matt Dearson on campus says the snow's let up on campus. I had to step out to take a phone call from my husband in Salem, and snow stopped in Salem, so maybe we're on the tail end of this thing,
Yeah.
so.
There
Just wind.
were a few points on the way down,
Problem.
vehicles, semis in the ditch, vehicles crashed into each other on the interstate. That's
Yeah.
just no fun,
Not good.
but we're live.
Live.
We're here.
Right, everybody made it, so I'm very, very thankful. I was a little worried for a minute, but you both showed up.
Yeah, that's right. We're live. Hopefully we can get home
Make it
alive
better.
too.
So,
Safer.
any last questions out there on the webinar? I really want to say a huge thank you to everybody for joining us today and for sticking with us through our delay early this morning when whatever happened and we got unconnected. We're going to plan on doing some more of these as we go through the summer, the rest of the spring and summer. And hopefully, if you enjoyed this, give us some feedback on what you thought worked, what didn't work, some changes to make. You know, this is a project in progress, I guess, as we're moving forward. So let us know what you think, what you thought of the presentations. If you have additional topics that you want to hear about, give us a call that way too. Shoot me an email. I think everybody has my email address in your tickets from today. So please be in touch. And if there's no further questions, we're going to mute this side and turn things off. Again, thank you to everybody for attending today, and we'll look forward to seeing and talking to you guys all in the future. So have a great day. Be safe out there. Stay warm as you can.